Let's hear his wisdom. A human being is a part of a whole, this whole called by us universe, and our part limited in time and space. One experiences oneself, one's thoughts and feelings as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of consciousness. This delusion is kind of a prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for just a few people nearest to us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty. When I lived in Louisville, with my home being 5 minutes from Churchill Downs, I became more aware of horse racing. And with the Kentucky Derby just 2 short weeks behind us now, talk begins of the likelihood of there being a racing trifecta. So let's play a little trifecta sports trivia game here. Who can tell me what the horse racing trifecta is called? Triple Crown. Does anyone know what the trifecta skill set in baseball is? Pitching, hitting, and stealing bases. Speed. This one might be a little bit easier. Basketball. If you get a triple-double, you have done well by doing right. Rebounds, assists, and scoring points. Exactly. We like this idea of trifecta in our culture. In show business, the trifecta person is somebody who can sing, dance, and act. And this isn't limited to the world of entertainment. It's also in the religious world and certainly in traditional Christianity with the trifecta known as the Holy Spirit. That's right. Yes. And it's central to the faith. So traditionally, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit comprises this Godhead, and one's relationship to that conceptualization of this Godhead is mostly linear in nature. God is 3, and it's God and me. Okay? Now, while this traditional concept isn't always literally embraced in more progressive circles, there is another 3-way which is very operative. It just doesn't get nearly as much press. The Holy Trifecta in more progressive circles includes God, however and whoever you experience that entity to be, God and me and thee, making 3. Divinity becomes less linear and more circular in a very real, not theoretical way. Divinity is experienced everywhere in the created world. And that means certainly and especially in thee and me. Now, this idea that God, the exact same, not like the image of or some representation, I'm talking about God, in God's presence, residing in a person, for some people, that can sound a little bit blasphemous. And that makes sense if you have more of this linear perspective. I'm God, I'm me, and God is God, and that is that. Water and flour are not the same thing. It's the blending that causes them and creates for them something new, a communion both tangible and relationally being in communion. My friends, if we recognized or focused more on the divinity that we inherently have as people, being God bearers, God carriers in this world, I believe this world would be vastly different than it is. I want to think on this for a moment, being God bearers. This can be a continuation of our Mother's Day vibe from last week. We heard in our reading about Mary being informed that she would conceive and bear Jesus. As a historical sidebar, 7th century theologians identified the date of March 25th to be the day that happened, because it's 9 months before December 25th, and we all know that these dates are pretty exact. Now, while some of us do take pause at the literalness of this story, there is beauty that can be gleaned from this if we're open. There was an Episcopal priest by the name of Reverend Allison Burns LaGreca, and she wrote this beautiful essay celebrating this event of the Annunciation, this Christian event in history. Listen for how it highlights us, not being about Mary, us being God bearers. She aptly entitled it, Becoming God Bearers in Our Own Time. You know the feeling. It's 3 a.m. You're scrolling again, watching the world break apart in real time. Another crisis, another betrayal, another reason to despair. Or it's midday and you are surrounded by people, messages pinging, notifications lighting up, and yet you feel so alone. Or it's the moment someone asks you, "How are you?" And you say, "Fine," because the truth is too heavy and too complicated and too much for that moment. We're living in a time, she says, when hope feels naive. When the distance between how things are and how things should be have become such a chasm that you can't stop staring into it. And you're tired of the polarized conversations that go nowhere, tired of watching systems fail people over and over, and underneath it, there's a quiet, persistent question. Does any of this matter? And then she goes on to say, there's a temptation when we hear the story of Mary, Jesus' mother, to place her far away from us, to make her holiness feel unreachable, unreal. But the truth is far more unsettling and far more beautiful. Mary was not chosen because she was distant from her humanity. She was chosen because she was so deeply in it. She knew what it meant to live under occupation. She knew how to navigate systems designed to marginalize people such as her and her family. To carry hope when she had every reason to abandon it. Being pregnant, away from home, no place to stay, not really knowing what the future held. And does any of this sound familiar for what's going on in our world today? Her story is not safely contained in the past. It's still unfolding, and it whispers something to each of the exhaustion that we are now carrying. That God is still trying to speak in the world, not through power, and there's plenty of power out there, isn't there? Not through power, but through people, through us. A lot of people think of Mary as being flawless, sinless. How could she have been anything else to give birth to Jesus? But to be a God bearer isn't about perfection, it's about willingness. Allowing something holy to take root in you, even if you don't feel ready, even if your heart and ours are, aren't they, heavy with fear about the unknown, full of questions. Mary didn't say yes because she felt ready. She said yes because she felt called. And there's a difference. Readiness calls for certainty, but a calling doesn't require certainty. It requires courage. I would like to share 2 examples of how I have experienced in the last week this idea of being God bearers. One was the leaders of a new church learning that their host church had deep concerns about carrying off the biggest event of their church year, their bazaar. And they are quietly sweating because they don't know if they can pull it off this year after years and years of doing it in this very space in which we sit. And this group of leaders quickly and unanimously, upon hearing of this need, said, yes, our group will step into this. Not because we don't have anything else going, not because we're a plethora of energy and don't know what to do with it all, but because we know what it means to be God bearers. Here's another quick example. A group, say a small group, who has this long-established membership and way of doing things, and then there's a new member who comes along who has some ailments. And these ailments introduced into the group dynamic changes that dynamic a little bit. This person isn't so able to travel these days, so not only does this group welcome this new member and all that she brings, but they quickly and unanimously decide to go from where they usually meet to her. Stretching, accommodating, because those people know what it means to be God bearers. Another thing that's a little bit close to home, this came up in conversations I had this past week. You might remember if you were here last week that you were invited to speak about what compels you, what draws you to our church and inspires you. And there were different offerings of what that was. And at first glance, it might have seemed self-congratulatory. This is why we're so great. We're this, and we're this, and we're this. But in essence, it was speaking to how our community, in concrete, real-life, impactful ways, is God-bearing to us. God, me, and thee. It was a beautiful thing to hear. I want to go back momentarily to the essay because there's more good stuff that Reverend Allison had to say. She said, this God-bearing work, not easy. Because if we're going to be honest with ourselves, it's going to cost us something. And it's going to cost the comfort of remaining detached, the safety about not caring too much, the protection that we keep for our heart at a manageable distance from the heat of the pain and the horror. But carrying God into this world asks you to hold hope when cynicism is way more logical, to not numb out. And this is when God comes, waiting for an opening, just a flicker of willingness, of a yes. Just a flicker of, let it be done with me, as Mary said all those years ago. It's as applicable now as it was when Gabriel showed up at Mary's place. But sometimes our attempts to be a God-bearer doesn't pan out. The receptivity from the corner of the triangle might be low. Such as, say, a couple of Sundays ago when I was driving myself here to church. I was running a little late, so I was hustling down the street. And there's a part of this street where the two lanes merge into one lane, and I was in the merge lane, and there was a lady in a pickup truck in the ongoing lane. Well, we came to the moment of merger, and I admittedly was not as conscientious about my roadway etiquette as I could have been. So instead of politely slowing down and falling behind her, I gunned it, jumped ahead of her. Not long after that inconsequential motorist transgression, we both came side to side at a red light. So I looked over at her, my hurriedness replaced with sincere God-bearing contrition. Friendly and engaging, I looked over, started to wave and smile to express my apology, and was met with the most definitive flipping off I have ever experienced in these 63 years. What could have put a damper on my excitement about fostering forgiveness, I did not allow it to be dampened because I decided to employ the golden rule. Because in this situation, if the roles were reversed and someone would have done something momentarily off-putting to me, true "I'm sorry" goes a long way with me. So I decided, do unto others what would work for me. So I continued looking at her. And we sat through that long red light while I am quietly imploring her to look back at me so I could say I was a jerk and I'm sorry. Well, the opportunity was not granted. The time went by, me looking directly at her looking intently ahead, undoubtedly aware of my little countenance there. And alas, the light finally turned green. She roared ahead. I made my left turn, made my way here. Being a willing divinity, presence, and ambassador doesn't guarantee outcomes. But the golden rule, as part of the God-bearing playbook, isn't about guaranteed responses, is it? When Jesus was delivering the Sermon on the Mount and he delivered the golden rule, he didn't say anything about guarantees or exclusionary clauses like, yeah, but, or disregard if they do this. And this part of his message is so central that many sages and prophets and religions speak to it. Check out the creative variations on this golden rule theme. An African proverb: one going to take a pointed stick to pinch a bird should first try it on himself to see how it feels. When Confucius was asked if there was one word that could serve as the principle for the conduct of life, he said the word is shu, which means reciprocity. Don't impose on others what you don't want imposed on yourself. The Muslim prophet Muhammad said, don't be people who mindlessly copy. If you're treated well, then you're going to treat well, and if you're not treated well, then you're not going to treat well. Instead, decide for yourself to do the right thing. The Jewish sage Hillel was approached by a heathen who said, "I will become a convert on the condition that you can teach me the entire Torah while I stand here on one foot." And Hillel said, "What is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor." That is it. That's the Torah. Everything else is commentary. Unitarian Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "Every person takes care that his neighbor does not cheat him. But when the day comes when he begins to care more about him not cheating his neighbor, that's when things are going to get better." Finally, Native American, avoid hurting the hearts of others. The poison of your pain will return to you. And all things are our relatives anyway. What we do to everything we do to ourselves, because all really is one. And doesn't that beautifully bring us back to the idea of divinity being circular? God, thee, and me. This encompasses all kinds of relationships, not just personal ones. Here's a fabulous example of one in the business world. Do we all remember J.C. Penney? I actually saw something about J.C. Penney online just this weekend and thought, is that still in existence? Maybe it is. I'm not sure. Anyway, Mr. Penney's first store, 1902 in Wyoming, was called the Golden Rule Store. He believed in low prices and good service to customers. If you give super good service to customers, it will create in them what he called a spring of sparkling goodwill, which will prompt them to want to help us to serve them. Kind of like Jerry Maguire, help me to help you. I wonder if he knew about Confucius' reciprocity. He didn't see any division between the secular and the sacred and said the golden rule is meant for business as much as any other human relationship. Well, right on. I don't know of any companies that operate that way now, but I hope they're out there. And I hope that's not part of the reason that we don't hear about JCPenney stores anymore. Here's another story about the golden rule. This one's imagined. Imagine that you want to arrive more deeply into the land of God-bearingness. And picture yourself planning the trip. You go to a used car lot, and you tell the salesman that you're planning a trip deep into the wilds of new territory, and that you need a vehicle to get you there. It needs to be reliable, and it needs to have GPS. The salesman, we'll call him Gabriel, lights up and says, "Oh, GPS, God's plan straight away, yes, yes. And if you need reliability and GPS, then I have got just the thing for you. It's this lovely golden thing here, and on the road, it rules." And you say, okay, I took a look at the new lot, but nothing felt right there. And then Gabriel's eyes soften, and he looks directly at you, and he says, for where you're headed, you don't need new. You need tried and true for this golden ruler of the road. The price of this car fits your spiritual bank account perfectly, but you're still nervous. Finally, upon further thought, you summon your courage, you say yes, and you are on your way. Friends, these stories, real and otherwise, along with the sage statements from the seers that we heard, they are all gold, and they do illuminate our way. May we bypass the need for an assessment of our readiness and instead cultivate our courage to be on the road because we said yes. So simple, yet so not. I look forward to hearing your comments about what any of these wise people had to say, your ideas about the golden rule, any inspirations you might have had.